So let's say this is my application. It's just a simple banking app. Some new features have been added to it, and I need to build tests for these as rapidly as possible. The new feature here is around the bill pay section. Now this application itself, if I can just jump into my environment diagram here, is made up of a series of front-end interfaces, a browser, some mobile device APIs, as well as some services. These services are undergoing change right now. I have some back-end services too. I need to test all of this, and I need to be able to rapidly get started. The challenge is that I'm a non-technical user, and so I don't really have domain expertise to understand the APIs. This is where Parasoft's Smart Recorder becomes quite valuable. The Smart Recorder allows me to traverse my application and test the different features in alignment with my user stories, or the journeys through my application, while simultaneously creating UI and API tests. I'm going to go ahead and start the recording and move through my application. So I'll log in here. I will go to the accounts portion, validate my balance here, jump into bill pay, and I'm going to fill out a form here. Now I'll go ahead and initiate a payment, get some information, and then jump back to my accounts overview. Okay, that was my user story. That is my journey. From this, I want API tests. I want Selenium UI tests. To do this, I'll simply come back here and stop my recording, and I'll go through two distinct wizards. The first one is about UI testing. This is indicating to me that 16 actions were executed. I can then associate them to a requirement, and this will create the full traceability loop, where I can come back and execute things associated with the requirements and get that bidirectional communication. I'm going to download this recording, and we'll deal with that in just a second. I'll just name it real quick. As I said, I'll come back to that. Now, what's happened is it's dropped me into the API piece here. This is where the Smart API Test Generator comes in. I'm going to name this API Test, Parabank Bill Pay. It's preserved the requirement and given me the ability to create a test artifact. Now, before I do that, let me explain really quick what's happening here. Our engine allows us to capture traffic that's taking place in the UI. This is great for manual testers because they can simply interact with the application and get all the different types of tests that they want. From an API perspective, what's going on here is that it's going to use AI to build the test scenario. Now, this goes beyond record and playback because, as you'll see when I dive in there, it's going to bring together dynamic information such as data exchange and automatically start building assertions and build a very connected and dynamic API test scenario. This will then import directly into SOA test, just like any other API test. So let's go ahead and look at that. So here I am back in this UI. I'm going to say, let's create the test artifact, and then that will drop me right back into the thin client architecture. Now that I've created the initial recordings for both my UI and API test, I can hand those off to my technical testing team. Now, I am one of those technical testers, whose job it is to increase test coverage across the application via UI testing, API testing, and so on. I'm going to go to the Parasoft ecosystem in the same browser-based interface used by the non-technical folks. In order to build a test case for the environment, I need the test case in the first place. Essentially, what's happening is that the test case I recorded has been delivered to me here in my dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and find it right away. Bill pay is here inside of my particular user file, and here is the API test that's been created. It's a full API test scenario. I could execute it directly right here if I wanted to. It has the requirements associated with it, so it's a perfect representation of that user's journey represented in API form. To take it one step further, it solves quite a few challenges associated with API testing. Based on a recent survey that we ran, those testing challenges are the initial creation of the test script, then it really breaks down into understanding how to build the payloads for those, how to build dynamic behavior into the test case so that the data is right, and managing those APIs when data changes. The Smart API Test Generator has dropped an API test that will solve all of those challenges. First off, I know what APIs are used, and if I were to drill into my report, I could actually understand the subset of APIs that were used, as well as their associated requirements. We've gone beyond a simple API test here, though. Notice how I have some smart created tools. These are built automatically from the AI, and they do things like automatically building some assertions or dynamically linking data together. In this case, the AI has picked up and said, I understand this is how this test executes. There's a link here between these tests that uses the ID, and it's grabbed that when you asked for a count. It's also grabbed that data from different pieces across the test and automatically stores them into variables. Those variables are then used in subsequent test cases. Let's look at bill pay. In the bill pay, it realized, hey, from a count is actually dynamic. So this takes a lot of the grind out of building that API test, as well as helping me build better API testing strategies. Now, down the line, I could augment or modify this strategy, adding different authentication, different rules, and so on. Then that information can be updated in my test repository. I can train the underlying AI what the new rules are, and with my API tests, such as adding different assertions, different authentication, so on. As new tests are created, those rules are picked up and automatically associated with new recordings. Now, a great example of this is actually right here in this test. The assertion did not come from the recording that I just made. This was a previously created assertion where I'm validating the customer ID. In this particular case, since it was stored in the brain, when it saw this particular API, it said, you need that, and automatically added it to my API test. This applies for not only assertions, but databank, as well as any reference tests. So in this case, I know there's some setup that needs to be done to test this API. I trained the AI that information earlier, and it automatically picked it up. Then this significantly decreases the effort that it takes to get into API testing and build rich and meaningful API tests.